Hello and welcome everyone to the third episode of the Big Purple Blob Morning Show. I am Sharoya Ham. I'm a behavior change specialist and parent coach. And it is my pleasure to be here with my dear colleague, Angie Solly, who is a teen counselor and life coach. Angie.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Joya. I'm so excited today to talk about teen hibernation. I think this is something that many of us as parents have seen in our own house, our teens kind of going off into their own cave, into their room, and hibernating. They're, not interacting with the world as much. And we see this on all different levels. Maybe it's just, a few days a week. Maybe it seems more constant. Sharoya, with all of your background and all of your work with parents, can you give us some insight into how to tell whether it's like a normal, healthy developmental part of becoming an adolescent or when it's a more serious concern and we need to do something about our hibernating teens?
Sure. First, I want to say that I love the teenage years. I love teenagers. I was once a secondary high school math teacher. And so I just want you to know I am thrilled to just kind of give you some background about what is happening in our teens' lives when they go into this hibernation stage and how you should view it. So I'm going to start in the very beginning. That's when we were all conceived. We all, at that very point, had the same goal throughout our years of life. From that point until now, and until we pass away, we will have the same mission in life, and that's to wiggle our way to independence. We are all craving that space where we can just be us. And so I want to walk us through the natural process and amazing process of development. So, when we take a baby out the hospital, usually the nurse, what does the nurse do? They swallow that baby up in a blanket and you bring it home. And you do the same thing every night to get the baby to feel comfortable and go to sleep. But what happens after 1 or 2 months? You notice that you swallow the baby, and then when you wake up in the morning, the baby has done what? Gained independence, gotten away, escaped from the blanket. And so then we have the age one, where they begin to start walking and grabbing the spoon and trying to gain some independence. And God knows what they go through age two. And then age three, when they have the words, they say, I want to do it. And then you have the age 4 to 8. Well, this time is kind of quiet, but what is happening there is they're developing their motor skills, their cognitive skills, and their physical skills, because they're getting ready to make an escape. Because around age 9 to 11, our kids begin to understand there's a world outside of home. What do they start to do? They start to ask us, can I go over to my friend's house? They realize their friends like being with them, and they enjoy being with their friends more than us. Well, development continues. And what happens around age 12 to 16? Something amazing happens. There is such a rapid development in cognitive and physical skills. Remember those games, sports games you used to beat your kids in? Or that Monopoly you used to win because your logic was stronger? Well, now they're outdoing you as a parent. So this is a wonderful time period. But make no mistake about it, it is also a tumultuous, or can be a tumultuous period for our teenagers 12 to 16. Why? Is because they have all of this development happening inside and outside. What are they to do with that? How is this even happening when they didn't press a button to make it happen? They have all of these thoughts going through their minds. This time, they don't shake for independence. Rather, they back up. And you see them going to their rooms or wanting to go to friends' houses more because they're trying to figure out What is this change? And when they begin to realize that their thought pattern is different from yours, they need a moment to go, how is that? How does my parent think this way and I think that way? The other thing is, it can be quite uncomfortable for them to be in the same room with you. Just imagine in your life, when you're feeling frustrated and you don't have the words to articulate, imagine being in a room with a loved one who knows you so well. Maybe it might be a sibling or a parent, your own parent, and they're looking at you and you know they know something is not right. And you are dreading that moment that they ask you, what's wrong? That's what's happening to our teens. They are in the room with us. They know that you can see that they're feeling some kind of way, and they know you're going to ask. So what do? They try to avoid us. Parents, I want you to understand that hibernation is not about our kids not liking us. It's about our kids needing the time to develop and figure out who they are independently. Aren't you excited about that? What do you think about that, Angie?
Sure, I love the way that you describe this because so often as parents, we get to a place where we're seeing things in a negative light and we're frustrated. And it really is like a marvelous, incredible time, right? Like these were little tiny people not so long ago, and we had to help them do everything. And it is like they're growing into this place of independence. So I love the way you described it. Thank you for pointing that out. And I love the swaddle imagery of them, constantly just trying to kind of
Yeah.
express themselves and break out of all of the protection that we put in, all the comfort that we put around our kids. Um, I think there are times for my kids, for sure, there are times in which when they really don't like me. And I know that, and that's okay as a parent. And they can not like me for a couple days or a couple weeks or even a couple months. And they can be angry and upset. But I like that you're pointing out that it's really a time of self-discovery, right? Like they need some time to themselves. And I think also as parents, I just want to remind everyone listening to trust your gut. We have that instinct. Like you said, sitting in the room with that teenager, you as a parent know when something is up, when something is off, you know your kid. And so if you know they just need to take some time to yourself. For our foreign service families and diplomatic families and overseas life, we're moving all the time. So it might be an adjustment to a new move in which, of course, you don't know who you are in that place. Maybe it's time to reinvent yourself, or you don't know who you are just in general because you're growing and changing and deciding, what your beliefs are and what your interests are at this age. So I think recognizing that maybe they're exploring that, or we moved, or there's been a breakup with a girlfriend or boyfriend, or something serious. Of course they're going to take time and they're going to want some space to themselves. And I think we can observe as parents, just pay attention to if you're concerned that your kid is hibernating and they're not interacting with you. It's easy for us to say, he hasn't spoken to me in 3 weeks. My teenager hasn't spoken to me in 3 weeks. So I would encourage you to even take a little note from time to time. Like, we sat and talked over lunch for a minute today, or overheard him laughing on the phone to a friend or playing video games. So recognizing that they are communicating, that there is that interaction from time to time, and making your own effort to connect in some way. So whether there are so many ways that we can connect with our kids that we're forgetting. Sometimes we think, I have to have a serious conversation and really get emotional and talk about all of the deep things, but it's not necessarily that. If you have a connection for a food that you like, a TV show that you watch together, a video game, it could be a memory that you have. If you just want to mention that to your kid, hey, I saw this today, it reminded me of that, memory that happened and share that with them. Their response doesn't have to be huge. They might shrug and say, "Oh, yeah, I kind of remember." But you're making that effort. They know that you're there. You keep reaching out. I want parents to remember that you can keep reaching out. You can keep making that offer 3 times a day. Maybe you just want to send a text message. Maybe you want to offer to play a game. Maybe you want to set an intention to have a meal together a few times a week. So it's hard with our teenagers to set things in place that are going to be the same. The way Sharoya said, like swaddling, it's not going to work. What worked last year, worked 2 years ago, is not necessarily going to work now. So get creative and find ways to connect with your kid. Sharoya?
Angie, totally agree. There comes a point in time in parenting where we got to let the minor things go and major in the major things. And connection is major. And so I'm so glad you brought that up, Angie. And I hope parents, you're really listening to think about ways to connect with your child that they enjoy. And that is key. Sometimes I work with parents and they come up with all these fantastic ideas and then they get their feelings hurt when their kids don't want to do it. And so you really want to go in there. And I know at times it's frustrating because they don't want to do anything. But we must take time to let our kids understand there are boundaries. So I wanted to share with you something I actually read. There's a mom, she wrote a blog. Her name is Tracy Leonard. And she wanted to find a way to find the balance between wanting to spend more time with her child and actually understanding that he needed more time to spend with himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so she decided to write out some clear expectations. And I want to share those with you. But what I want to encourage you to do is to not just write expectations, but to have a conversation with your team where you develop expectations. And at the core of it, you ask them why. Why for each one of these that I'm about to read off to give you some ideas of what you can say are the boundary lines of how you want your kid to grow and do the normal development while honoring the fact that they are still a part of a family. And as a member of the family, they must participate in the family. But now how much they have to do that is worth a conversation. And I want to just pause here for a minute and tell parents one book I love because connection has so much to do with communication. The book is titled How to Talk So Your Teen Will Listen and How to Listen So Your Teen Will Talk. And we will put a link to that book in the show notes. So here's what this parent wrote in terms of the guidance she had for her son. She says, if you are in your room, the blinds need to be open and the lights on unless you're sleeping. Now, what I would say, if that's what they came up with, just asking your teen, why do you think I would like for you to do that? So you can get at the core, that they can tell you sometimes it's dangerous to sit in a dark room. Because what does that do? It affects your mood. So they already know this. Just ask them the question of why, because you want to make sure they understand this is not about control. This is about love and wanting you to develop in a healthy manner. So the next point she brings up, she says, you must come out for dinner. And I totally agree with this one. There are some deal breakers, like I'm giving you space to stay in your room, but you must come out for dinner. The chores must be done by a certain time. Give them a time so that then they can have choice of when it gets done. On the list, she includes dad or I can come in at any time and check your browser history, chats, and more. Again, worth a discussion. Why do you think we're doing this if we're not trying to control you? Make your teen answer it. just refuse to go anywhere until they give you an answer. I mean, but not contentious. Just say, listen, I'm just going to wait here because I want to make sure we have these in place for tomorrow. The next one you can do is one weekend, is have a family day, one weekend per month. Have a family meeting where they must participate. All right. And then, of course, digital boundaries of what they can do or, what sites are not acceptable. I think it's a fine time to talk about pornography and sexting, and covering those topics. So set the framework for what you want your teen to do, but make sure they're clear on why so that they understand this is not about control, but this is about creating a safe space for them in their rooms where they can find some solitude and enjoyment aside from the family, because you get it. You understand that they are evolving into an independent thinker and adult.
I love that, Troy. I think it's so good for us to acknowledge our teens and say, like, I get it. You're changing, right? Like, I understand that you want your independence. I understand all the reasons that you want to be in your room and you want time away from us. Like, I get it. But also there's another factor here, and that's us, right? That's your family. And we have wants too. We want to spend time with you. We're not going to go all in one direction where you have all the privacy and you can remove yourself entirely to do whatever you want. And we're not going to make you spend 100% of your time with us doing everything that we want. Let's have a discussion about it. And often I think when you read that list, I was thinking to myself, like, this would be hard to implement with my own children. So my daughter just turned 20 yesterday. I love what you said about marvel instead of mourn. I had all these feelings of 20, that's really old, and remembering her as a baby. So I think sometimes these books that we're looking at, and I love that book, by the way, is one of my favorite books. Often I read a parenting book and I feel like, oh no, I messed up. I haven't done all of these things right. And I think sometimes as parents, we can read those books and decide that we're failing and it's hard to implement it. But you know your kids. So just set those 2 or 3 of the factors that work for you, and the restrictions that are most important to you. You can set that up. We have that ability to just decide at age 17. I didn't have these rules in place before, and now I am putting them in place. I think I talk to a lot of parents who say, well, I didn't do this before. And they're like, well, you let me do it when I was 15. So now we still have the ability to set up parameters in our house at any time and have that conversation with our kids. So I really like that you brought that up, and pointing out to parents, these books were not written with a worldwide pandemic in mind, or not necessarily for 2021. So when you read something like that and think of yourself as having a struggle with that, I think you can adjust and shift your own perspective to recognize we just moved and our world is in upheaval now. So we're not going to have probably a meal every single night together. And you can just decide what's going to work for you in that time frame of what's happening in your life based on who your kid is, what your expectations are, what's going on in your life and your world right now, and just apply what works for you.
Angie, you mentioned that you had a 20-year-old, and I take it coming back into the house, and that I think you said something wouldn't work for your 20-year-old. Talk a little bit more about that, because it makes sense. There are different needs at different ages. So can you share a little bit more about that?
So my 20-year-old right now, just that she turned 20 was the part that I was sort of like steering into that morning that you spoke about, of
Okay.
like, oh no, you're not a little kid anymore. I can't believe you're 20. But certainly we have had to adjust because now my kids are 20, 18, 15 and 13, and they all see what the other one does. So there's always that comparison, like, well, she's allowed to do this, and he did that when he was this age, so I should be allowed to do that. And we really have different rules for different times because, the age that one kid had a cell phone does not dictate 5 years later the age that the other kid has a cell phone. It just doesn't work that way. And I tell them all the time, like, we are putting into place, like you said, like, why are we having this rule? Why do you think we have this rule? And of course, their initial answer is most often because you want to control everything I do. And if you say, like you said, if it's not for me controlling everything you do, what else could it be about? And they do come around to say, I know you want me to be safe. So we just put those individual, unique, restrictions, parameters around what works right now in this situation, in this time of life for this kid. And I tell them all the time, you're a different kid. You have different strengths and weaknesses. You guys don't like the same sports. You don't have the same favorite game. Like, you're different people. So we're going to have different restrictions.
And you just made me think of something I think is so important when we're talking about having conversations.
Mhm.
I highly recommend for parents to do the conversation one-on-one with the child. I don't know if you want to do it with both parents, but not in a conversation with other children around, because this is what key during this stage. They want to know that they're different.
Mhm.
And so just by simply going into their room or just approaching them and say, hey, I want to take you out one-on-one, that gives them the thought that this conversation is unique to me. And I think that just sets the tone. So I would encourage parents to do that and see how that works, because nobody likes to be confronted in front of other people.
That's so true, Shara. My younger two are 17 months apart, and so we have a tendency to just put them in the same group. And then I say, like, "Hey, new rule, guys, no screens until after 5 p.m." And they'll say, like, "That's because he did this yesterday. You can't put that rule on me. I never do that." And it's true. We need to recognize that our kids are unique individuals and they have different needs, each one individually. So thanks for that reminder. What about with your family, Sharoy? Did you have a situation to share?
Well, I too have one that is turning 20 this month.
Okay.
And so I should say next month, well, which is a day away in
Oh.
April. And what is so funny about him is he is the one who really pushes boundaries. He wants to know how far he can go. And so he is in the US in college. And this summer, when I went home, I noticed, he was flexing his independence, showing me different ways that he does what he wants to do when he wants to do it. And I just kind of took it all in for a little while and just wanted to see what was he doing with his independence? What type of decisions was he making? Now, my husband tends to be a little bit more less lenient with some things. And so I noticed that he kept going to my husband asking for things. And then one day he says, okay, I'm going to the store. And he grabs our car keys. And my husband didn't say anything. And I just looked at him and I said, babe, meet me in the bedroom. And he looked at me, he smiled because he knew that he had gone across a line that I have. And so we walked into the bedroom. I said, why are we in here? Because one of the strategies I try to use with my teens in particular is getting them to tell me
Mhm.
the issue, because they know it. And I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to keep repeating myself. So I said to him, why are we in here? He was like, I don't know, Mom, because I'm 19 plus. And I was like, okay, yes, you're 19 plus. He's like, and I'm quite the mature 19 plus. I said, I'll give you that too, son.
Mhm.
But why are we in here? And he said, because uh, I just said I was going to the store and took the keys. I said, yeah. And what should you do? He said, I should ask, can I take the car and drive to the store? I said, yeah. All right, want to try it again? And then just let him go.
Mhm.
Just, I want parents, you to understand you can be firm, you can be calm, and you can be kind. And our kids need all of that. So they understand that you're still here. They have to be respectful. They still have to follow age appropriate rules in the house. And, um, and then they can see that it's not about control, but it is more about setting healthy boundaries that will keep them safe and as much as possible. So yeah, thanks for letting me share that story.
Oh, that's a great story. I'm glad you brought that up. I love that it's a 19, 20-year-old, like that we can still have an influence on how our kids behave when they're with us. And what they do when they're out is up to them, but we can still plant those seeds all of the time in our interactions with them.
So Angie, I want parents to leave here with practical things, and you've given us some things. I want to make sure you got everything out that you've brought to this presentation today, because I know with you working with teens, you just have a unique perspective of how they think and what they appreciate from their parents during this time in their lives.
Well, you've brought up a ton of good points. Yeah, I want parents to know that that they don't have to catastrophize. We don't have to let fear rule everything that we're doing.
That's a good one.
I think that's important. We can have that fear and worry, and then just bring it back to calm down and think about it. What would I do? How do I want to solve this? I also want everyone to know that you can trust your gut. Think about if your instinct is that something is off with your kid and this hibernation is going to an extreme, and they're really struggling with something, to get them to talk to somebody, to put some new processes in place to make sure that your kid has that support and knows you're there. And I think everything you've said is so true. Our teenagers want to be part of the conversation. They appreciate being the one who, when you're asking them, why do I want this rule in place for you? They get to contribute. And even if they are saying, it's because you want to control me, they recognize that you're giving them the opportunity to share their opinion. And I think what you said about parents having a lot of excitement over a new system that they're going to install, and then the kid resists it and the teenager doesn't want to do it. I think we can appreciate, hey, I'm offering that support. Maybe my kid's going to reject it 5 times in a row, but they know I'm here. And I keep saying, like, hey, want to play this game with me? Hey, it's Saturday, let's go do the thing. And they can think I'm annoying, but they recognize if someone asks them, is your mom there for you? Is she available? Does she make time for you? It's just that offer. So their reaction is not as important as making sure that we're doing something that we want to provide for them, that we're just making the offer and contributing that.
That's excellent, Angie. I want to just feed off of that for a moment, because I talked about remembering to marvel and not mourn, and really helping parents to understand this is a season that's not about, them hating you. And you mentioned it, Angie, that they can say how their parents kept being kind or kept saying, come on and join us, even when they weren't so pleasant. That's important. They will remember that. And so, aside from I want you to remember to marvel and not mourn, I also want you to remember that you're wanted and appreciated. Now, I'm going to tell you also what they want you to do and what they appreciate. So, here we go. Your kids want you to enjoy your life. And so they appreciate it when you do activities without them. So think of things that you enjoy and just say to them, okay, I'm going out today. I'm doing, I'm going running, or I'm going to go play a game, or you just sit there and play a game and watch them see that you're doing an activity without them. Our teenagers want to know that that you're okay without them being there constantly and being a friend to them. So go ahead and make some choices. I had someone tell me recently that when her daughter comes home from school, she tries to be very active and do something around the house and just say hi to her. And she's noticed that her daughter has gone to her room more. Or gone to her room, but come out of her room more because her mom is not asking her from the time she hits the door, how was school? How was this? Did you do this? And so she says to me, I recognize the less I hover, the more my child talks to me. All right. So the next thing I want you to remember is your child wants you to talk about them less. They appreciate when you refrain from sharing stories about them.
Oh, that's so true, Sharoya. Yes.
And so they escape when as soon as they hear us talking about them, they want out. Whether it's just on the phone, we're sharing with a friend about them, they don't like it. So I just want to encourage you that they want you to talk about them less, and they appreciate when you refrain telling stories about them. Last one, they want you to listen, and they appreciate when you validate the way they think. You may not agree with what they said, but chances are, if you listen well, our kids have great logic. And logic doesn't mean you always end up at the right answer. It just means you thought something through and went step by step. And if you can take some time out and go, wow, I never thought about it that way. That was different. I appreciate you helping me to see that differently. What happens? They no longer want to avoid you all the time. You become a nice, pleasant person to be around because you can just accept them where they are in their stage of adolescence. Okay, so I hope you find that practical and helpful to you. And I want to say, Angie, can you please tell us, because I know sometimes our kids need support. Sometimes our kids need support navigating through this time. Angie, I know you offer support for teens. So can you please tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So I am a counselor and a life coach, and I run groups for teenagers. What I wanted to create for teens is a space where they recognize that they are not alone in their concerns and struggles, that they can share um, their emotional challenges. And so we meet once a week. It's usually a group of about 6 teens, and we talk open-ended questions. So no one has the spotlight on them. No one has to talk to me directly for an hour and go see your counselor. But they kind of hear if one kid is struggling with a friendship that they're having in their high school, usually someone else has something to say about it. I can offer some insight and to make sure that our kids are aware of their own emotion and their responsibility, their ability to respond, right? They cannot control how others around them are acting or what their friends are doing, but reminding our teenagers that they have the ability to decide how they react to those things and how they react when their parents are, when they're in a challenge, in a conflict with their parents. So that's the space I provide for the teenagers. And sometimes we're talking about the emotions of Iron Man and how so it gets it's sort of, casual and creative, and everybody gets a little bit more insight into their emotions. That's what I do. Sharoy, can you tell us about your work as a behavior specialist?
I will, but you just kind of made me inquisitive about Iron Man. Tell me about Iron Man.
Right, like his emotions, who he is in that suit, total confidence. And when he's not in the suit, like how much does the suit provide his confidence, and how much is he still that snarky person when when your powers, your superpowers get taken away, like the Hulk, right? Like his emotions take over and we see that physical change. So sometimes we end up in these Avenger conversations about, who you are on the inside and how those feeling confidence or knowing you can get the job done changes the outcomes in your life.
Wow, Angie, I can just see how that applies to our kids as TCKs.
Mhm.
Almost like, who am I in the context of this location
Yes.
versus the who I am when I went home this summer. I felt different because that was familiar. I could connect with people or vice versa. And so, wow, that's a powerful conversation. So I can imagine you guys have some deep conversations.
We have some fun talks in the group.
Good, good. So, in terms of my work, I support parents and just helping them transition. I watch so many parents go into that place of mourning, like, I wish it was still my baby. And I think about that all the time and I go, what if a significant other said to us, I just wish you were skinny like before? Yeah, but sometimes we parents actually say that to our kids. I just wish you were still young, or that cute little kid. No, we can't say that. Because we need to really, I know it's hard sometimes when they're bucking up against us, but we have to understand this is the secret that our kids, our teenagers need the same affection, support, and guidance that we once gave them as kids, but they need us to show it differently, using different words, using different actions, and setting up different frameworks for what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so, what I've been doing it recently during the pandemic, recognizing parents have just this extra need for support and community and conversation, is to host and facilitate support groups for parents. And it has been such a pleasure. Recently, I just ended a 4-week support group and I asked parents to draw. I wanted them to see how did they perceive their parenting in the beginning of the 4 weeks and now in the end. And I wish I had a picture here to show you because one parent just surprised me. She came in first of all and she was just so frustrated. Why won't my son just follow directions? And she would use the word, I just want him to obey me. I didn't even think parents use that word anymore. I just want him to obey me. And, but at the end of the 4 weeks, she held up this picture of a bubble and a stick figure of her and her son. And when I looked close, I actually saw she was holding her son's hand in that bubble. And he's 16 years old. And then in the end, her second picture was two bubbles. Let me go back to the first bubble. The first bubble where both of them had frowns on their face. And then the second bubble, she's no one bubble, excuse me, in the second picture, she has one bubble with her in, one bubble with her son, but there's like space for them to go in and out. And there's no more holding hands. She says, I recognize I don't have to protect him anymore.
Mhm.
I just have to be there for him when he makes mistakes. And so that's what I love about the support group, because these parents are getting support from other parents who are going through and they're developing these aha moments on their own. There's not much teaching that I do. It's just facilitating and helping parents by providing them daily assignments, which I call heart work. It's a lot of reflection for them. And they come to this place of recognizing and marveling instead of mourning. And so I'm just excited to continue to do support groups. The next one starts May 2nd. So parents, if you need support, I hope you would reach out to us individually. Any of the of us blobbers, we are here to serve you.
That's right. And we'll put our website on the show notes so you can find us individually. And we always have all the information on thebigpurpleblob.com.
Okay, Angie, if I can, the last resource I wanted to include and let you know about is I had a workshop called the How to Talk So Your Team Will Listen. But in there, it includes 4 C's that you need to consider to develop that connection and a strong base for communication. So if you want to take a look at that instead of read the book, it kind of includes many concepts of the actual book of how to talk so your team will listen. So I want to offer that as a resource for you all as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sharoya.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening to the Big Purple Blob Morning Show. It has been a pleasure to share our stories with you. Now, we want to hear from you. Tell us your story or send us your questions and comments about the show. Our email, as well as the resources mentioned during the podcast, can be found in the show notes. Lastly, if you found this episode helpful, please share it with others. And remember, we are here for you.